trust his colleagues. I did not hear the excitement yesterday, but we move on. We will have now the member from St. James Southern, who will make her presentation, Madam Speaker.
Oh, Shana, okay, good. Okay. You may begin. Madam Speaker, me get up this afternoon to make my first sectoral speech. Hold on. Standing orders. And I think you are fully aware. And if I have to stop you again during your presentation, you will not get any additional time. No, and she knows. Standing order 6, page 3. When I speak to
your presentation and that's Spanish.
Madam Speaker, Leroy, allow me to speak. A leader. Madam Speaker, perhaps I should abandon that attempt to use our local language because I have been reminded of the linguistic conventions of this honorable house. Because maybe there is no more fitting way to begin a presentation on culture than to speak briefly in the language understood by the overwhelming majority of Jamaican people. Even if that language still struggles for full acceptance in some of our most formal national spaces, including this very parliament. So let me give you the Queen's English. Let me give you the Queen's English. At the outset, permit me first to thank the leader of the opposition, the Most Honorable Mark Golding, for the confidence he has placed in me through this portfolio assignment. I also thank my parliamentary colleagues, my councillors, my constituency and personal team, and the many people who support the demanding work of representation and public service every single day. Public life is never carried by one person alone. And I especially want to thank my parents, Miss Faye and Pastor Burchell, for instilling in me from very early a deep love for Jamaica, a deep respect for people, right, Leroy? And a deep pride in our culture, particularly through faith, religion, community, and service. Much of what I understand today about identity, resilience, storytelling, and the spirit of Jamaican people began long before politics. It began in church. It began in my community. It began in school. It began in my yard. And permit me especially to acknowledge the people of South St. James who traveled all the way from country to town to sit in this chamber today to hear their MP deliver her maiden sectoral presentation. From Anchovy to Catadupa, from Maroon Town to Welcome Hall, from Springfield to Mount Carey. Thank you for making the journey. Thank you for believing in me. The people of South St. James are not merely observers of Jamaican culture. We are carriers of it. We're protectors of it, builders of it. And I want them to know that every single day I walk in this house, I never forget what it means to represent you. I never forget where I come from. And I will fight every single day for the people of South St. James and for the dignity, the potential and future of rural Jamaica. I'm a country girl. Before I proceed into the substance of this presentation, permit me briefly to make an observation about the structure of our sectoral debates themselves. It would perhaps be far more useful to the country if the sequencing of these presentations allowed the Jamaicans first to hear from the sitting portfolio minister outlining the government's priorities, their achievements and proposed direction, and then shortly thereafter hear from the opposition spokesperson engaging those ideas directly, identifying the gaps, strengthening proposals where necessary, and advancing alternative visions where appropriate. That's developmental. Because the purpose of these debates should not merely be performance, political theater, or ritual. They should also function as developmental dialogue. And so in this instance, I speak before the country has yet heard from Minister Olivia Antibabzi-Grange herself. But permit me nonetheless to acknowledge her long-standing commitment to this ministry and the energy she has invested over many years in Jamaica's cultural and entertainment sector. Pick up yourself, Auntie Babsy. But in the absence of that sequencing structure, I will use this opportunity not merely to critique, but to place on the table a broader national vision. Because culture, creativity, entertainment, and information cannot continue to exist at the margins of national development policy. They're not ornamental. They're not side conversations. They're not ceremonial add-ons. They are infrastructure, economic infrastructure, tourism infrastructure, employment, identity, digital infrastructure, soft power infrastructure, democratic infrastructure. And perhaps no country on earth proves that more clearly than Jamaica. Long before many countries knew our GDP, they knew our music. Before they knew our exports, they knew our athletes. Before they knew our population size, they knew our sound, our language, our creativity, our spirit. Jamaica is a cultural superpower with a developing economy. And that reality demands that we begin treating culture, creativity, and information not as peripheral concerns of government, but as strategic pillars of economic development and global influence. I'm going to speak to culture as infrastructure. For some people, culture is an event. For people like me, culture is how we survive. I come to this portfolio not only as a parliamentarian, but as a daughter of rural Jamaica, a daughter of South St. James, raised in communities where culture was not something carefully packaged and occasionally consumed, but something we lived every single day. We heard it in the churches, how we clap, how we dance, how we sing. We heard it in our music. We heard it in the marketplaces. We heard it in the sound systems drifting across districts at evening time. In the cadence of our elders' storytelling, in our revival meetings, in our zinc fence conversations, in the humor and resilience of ordinary Jamaican people. Before I ever studied communication academically at the London School of Economics, I experienced communication culturally. Before I ever understood branding professionally, I understood identity instinctively. And perhaps that is why I approach this portfolio with a deep conviction that culture is far more than your entertainment. Culture shapes how our people see themselves. Culture determines whether a nation walks with confidence or with insecurity. Culture influences how the world sees us and how we see ourselves. Culture carries memory, it carries resistance, it carries aspiration, and it carries opportunity. Yet too often in Jamaica, Culture is still treated as an ornamental, as though it is merely something to entertain us after the serious business of nation building is complete. But culture is not separate from development. It builds economies. It builds economies. It builds tourism, builds social cohesion, it builds confidence. It builds diplomacy and global influence. And just like roads, schools, ports, and digital systems, culture requires investment. It requires maintenance, systems, and vision. A country that neglects the cultural infrastructure eventually weakens its national confidence. And a country that exports culture globally while underinvesting in the people who create it leaves enormous economic and human potential unrealized. Too often in Jamaica, culture remains concentrated in Kingston, within isolated institutions, or within occasional annual events, Grand Gala. But culture must live where the people live. And the economic benefits of culture must reach the communities that created it in the first place. That means the rural communities, the inner city communities, the artisans, the musicians, the storytellers, the craft vendors, the food vendors, young digital creators, small business operators, ordinary, everyday Jamaicans whose life experiences shape the Jamaican identity the world now consumes. Because Jamaica's culture was not manufactured in a boardroom. It was born in communities, in districts, in churches, in the dancehall spaces. And if culture is truly to become infrastructure, then we must democratize culture. Ownership and economic participation must be open. What do I mean? The people who create Jamaican culture must also meaningfully benefit from its economic value. At present, too much of our cultural economy remains informal, fragmented, undercapitalized, and understructured. Too many creatives still struggle with financing, licensing, distribution, intellectual property protection, institutional support, and long-term sustainability. Too often we speak about culture emotionally while failing to structure it economically. But culture is not merely performance. It's not an item on the program. Culture is value chains. A properly developed cultural product activates entire ecosystems. The seamstress benefit, the farmer benefit, the chef benefit, the transportation provider benefit, the videographer, the tour guide, the makeup artist, entire communities benefit. And perhaps one of the clearest examples of untapped cultural potential sits deep in the hills of South St. James, the story of our national hero, Sam Sharp. Too often, we reduce Sam Sharp to a portrait on a mural wall somewhere, a face on a currency note, or a once-a-year ceremony attended by a sprinkling of people in Catadupa Square. But Sam Sharp was visionary, intellectual, spiritually grounded, charismatic, revolutionary. And what he ignited through the Christmas War, we don't call it rebellion, helped to accelerate the collapse of slavery across the entire British Empire. It's a powerful man. So it's not merely Jamaican history that he influenced world history. The audacity of that young Baptist preacher from deep bush, South St. James, lit flames of freedom for far beyond Jamaica's shores. So the question becomes, how do we move from memorializing our heroes to mobilizing their stories as living cultural infrastructure? Imagine immersive heritage journeys beginning in Croydon, where he was born, moving through Lapland, Budtrack, Moko, Kensington, tracking their way down into Montego Bay, where he lit flames of freedom. Imagine sections of the old railway system reimagined into experiential heritage journeys, retracing the pathways that Sam Sharp and his freedom fighters moved during the Christmas War. Imagine visitors traveling through history itself, actors, storytellers, drummers, food vendors, costume designers, tour guides, historians, entire communities participating in a living cultural economy rooted in Jamaica's history. Not abstract history, living history. That Madam Speaker, is how rural economies remain alive. That is how tourism moves beyond resort walls. That is how educational tourism develops. That is how communities participate directly in the monetization of their own heritage and identity. Because Jamaica must move beyond limiting cultural tourism to occasional performances and resort entertainment. Yeah. People no longer simply want to observe culture, they want to experience it. And Jamaica possesses one of the richest cultural experiences anywhere in the world. But too often we fail to organize it intentionally. Just last week, Jamaica witnessed something deeply revealing. International digital influencer iShowSpeed visited Jamaica briefly. And within hours, millions globally were immersed in Jamaican culture through live streams and social media. And what captured global attention was not polished advertising. It wasn't the sun, sand, and sea advertisement. It was authenticity. People experienced Jamaican humor or music, language, dance, food, energy, and our big personalities. And of course, iShowSpeed had to come and visit the unofficial tourism minister, Popcorn Andre Sutherland. What we witnessed was digital tourism marketing, but it was packaged for iShowSpeed. We deserve that kind of packaging every week, every month in our country, not just to show up once for the year. So why should cultural activation feel seasonal in the cultural capital of the Caribbean? Why should tourists struggle to find recurring, immersive Jamaican cultural experiences every single week? They should be booking flights coming to Jamaica, know that they will see a Jamaican artist performing that week in a stage show somewhere, not just for some fest. Live performances from our major artists, showcases from emerging artists, dramatizations, storytelling activations, folk performance, dance, showcase, artisan markets, and curated cultural experiences continuously across Jamaica, not just one time for iShowSpeed and to show off for him. Even in recent weeks, Jamaica has been having an interesting cultural conversation surrounding the reinterpretation of the traditional folk piece, Hill and Gully Rider, now reimagined by younger creators through more modern and controversial lens. Some Jamaicans see that reinterpretation as disrespectful to traditional culture. Others see it as evidence that culture is alive, evolving and remixing itself through newer generations and newer forms of expression. And perhaps the real point is not simply whether we personally prefer one version over the other. The real point is that Jamaicans are still engaging with our folk traditions at all. They're still pulling for them, debating them, reworking them, arguing them, and in doing so, keeping cultural memory alive in contemporary spaces. Countries have built billion-dollar industries around fictional heroes, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, yet Jamaica possesses real heroes whose courage changed history itself. Why should Jamaican children know more about fictional superheroes than about Sam Sharp, Nani, and Paul Bogle? We should dramatize Sam Sharp, animate him, write novels about him, produce streaming series about him, make him emotionally accessible to younger generations. Show him as human, young, brilliant, charismatic, in love, alive, because storytelling itself is economic infrastructure. I'll move quickly to the creative industries, entertainment, and economic modernization. The global creative economy is now valued at over $3 trillion. It is time for Jamaica to claim a larger share. Today, the global economy is increasingly shaped by streaming, digital media, AI, influencer economies, creator platforms, and direct-to-audience activation, or aesthetics, or dance styles, or slangs mid-air. They're traveling globally. Yet too often Jamaica remains at the edge of the value chain rather than at the center of ownership. We export influence, but we under-capture value. And that is one of the great economic questions of our time. How do we ensure that the people creating cultural value also retain economic value? Because intellectual property is no longer a secondary issue. It is economic infrastructure. And Jamaica must position itself aggressively around copyright protection, licensing, royalties, creator education, digital monetization, and ownership rights. And that is why investment in creative industries cannot be treated as charity or cultural goodwill. It is economic strategy. It is youth employment strategy. It is export strategy. It is digital economy strategy. And that is why the People's National Party had already proposed from as early as 2025 a $1 billion creative economy support fund, regional creative hubs, content studios, audiovisual training, and structured support for young creators and creative entrepreneurs. I think it's time the government do that for them, because talent without structure cannot fully scale. Jamaica must move beyond being merely a scenic backdrop for other people's productions. And I speak as the proud MP of an area in South St. James called Flat Johnson, where one of the earliest James Bond films utilized the beautiful white mountain backdrop in our constituency. So I understand the value of Jamaica's scenery and the cinematic appeal. But Jamaica must move beyond being merely a backdrop for their stories. We must become owners of stories ourselves, exporters of stories, controllers of intellectual property. Because storytelling is one of the most powerful economic tools in the modern world. And this conversation must also include entertainment itself. Because Jamaica's marketed identity versus Jamaica's regulatory reality remains deeply contradictory. And those lived contradictions within Jamaican entertainment policy must now be confronted honestly, Juliet. This is why the PNP proposed special entertainment zones, one-stop simplified licensing systems, and more coherent entertainment frameworks. Because entertainment is not disorder. Stop, lock off the dance. Entertainment is economy. Entertainment is employment. It is tourism. It is youth opportunity. Entertainment is national identity. And yes, residents deserve peace. Communities deserve safety. But regulation cannot continue functioning primarily as suppression, lock off the dance. So we cannot continue to hypocritically celebrate dancehall globally while criminalizing many of its economic spaces locally. And even the government itself has acknowledged the need for structured entertainment infrastructure through discussions surrounding entertainment development zones in areas such as Negril, as announced by the Prime Minister? Or is that something that they made up on the campaign trail? Is this merely another announcement because nothing still not gone? The issue is whether we are approaching Jamaica's brand and identity comprehensively, intentionally, and nationally. And that brings us to Rastafari and Ganja. Because Jamaica's response to St. Kitts' formal recognition of Rastafari exposed something uncomfortable. Yes, Jamaica pointed to broad constitutional protections around freedom of religion. But perhaps the deeper issue is that we were not sufficiently intentional. We did not go far enough. And because we did not fully structure, codify, and affirm something so deeply Jamaican, another country was able to claim leadership in formally recognizing what the world already associates most powerful with Jamaica itself. They might take Rastafari from us. Because Rastafari is not merely an aesthetic exported through reggae music and tourism imagery. It is philosophy. It is a spiritual tradition, a political history, and a way of life born from resistance. The contradiction too, that contradiction too must be addressed honestly. And we must also confront the unresolved contradictions surrounding ganja itself. The 2015 amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act under the PNP administration represented an important step toward reducing the criminalization of ordinary Jamaicans, particularly poor youth, entertainers, and Rastafarians, whose lives were permanently damaged by criminal records connected to small quantities of marijuana. That reform mattered. You didn't deal with that. PNP did that. That was 2015. That was 2015. But over a decade later, you don't do nothing about it. Jamaica must honestly ask what comes next. Because while global cannabis industries continue expanding medicinally, commercially, and economically, Jamaica still appears uncertain about how strategically it intends to position itself within ganja's future. And the worst thing about it is that too often, those now economically positioned to benefit from the emerging ganja industry are not the same communities that endure decades of criminalization and exclusion under the old system. That contradiction too must be confronted honestly. Speak quickly to my other portfolio assignment, information. Let me now turn briefly to talk to you about information itself as infrastructure. The architecture of public communication is changing rapidly across the world. Traditional media institutions are under severe economic pressure. Advertising revenues are shrinking. Digital disruption is accelerating. Audience habits are changing. Newsrooms are shrinking. Media houses are restructuring. And increasingly, government itself has become one of the largest advertising clients, sustaining portions of the traditional media ecosystem. Every other advertisement on radio and TV is sponsored by a government agency, ministry, department. And strangely, government itself now appears to be attracting many of the very workers traditionally media houses are struggling to retain. We're told that one is being moved to JIS shortly. So the media, the government is okay with the media shrinking because they don't need that third estate to hold them to account. At the same time, concerns continue to emerge surrounding media sustainability, concerns around government advertising concentration. Some stations get more than others of the government's advertising spend. Some stations get hefty tax write-offs and others are struggling. And this raises important questions about public communication governance and the independence of media that must make you feel uncomfortable. Because across government today, communication spending has become Madam Speaker, there may have some protection, please, from the leader of government business acting. Madam Speaker,
members,
I want
please
protection
allow
from
the
the
member
Deputy House Speaker
to have her presentation. What did she say? Are you standing?
Point of order.
Is there?
Right. Madam Speaker,
Standing order.
on a point of order. A very serious allegation was made by the Speaker. The Speaker said that a media house, the presenter said a media house was the beneficiary of massive write-off, tax write-off. She said a media house was the beneficiary of massive tax write-off. Madam Speaker, I would like the Speaker to be clear, since she is presenter, to establish which media house has been the beneficiary of massive tax write-offs. Because, Madam Speaker, she has come to the house and cast a cloud over the entire media in Jamaica that they are benefiting from tax write-offs from the government. And there is no fact about it, and I needed to rule.
I needed that sip of water. Thank you for the opportunity.
Member, I'm not running your time. Please hold.
Thank you. Who are you talking about, nation? Who are you talking about? Who are you talking about? Who? You were listening up to now. Just like Paris, country suit. This is not Paris, it's a country suit.
So, are you ready? Members, I'm allowing the member to go ahead. The question raised as a point of order in respect of an allegation made against a class of individuals or entity, which would be media houses,